Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be discussing the Palestine Laboratory by Antony Loewenstein, how Israel exports the technology of occupation around the world. It's a very effective cover. You can see it looks like it's going through a camera lens with the record light up there. It's one of the newer books that I've reviewed actually on this channel. It was published in 2023. And it's a work that reminds us that the occupation of the Palestinians is not just something that affects them. Obviously, it also affects the Israelis, who have to destroy parts of their humanity to do this to other humans. But it's also technology that ends up getting sold to other people in the world as battle-tested technology. Battle-tested, i.e. on civilians. And so it means that the occupation actually goes out much further than Palestine. Israel has developed a world-class weapons industry with equipment conveniently tested on occupied Palestinians, then marketed as battle-tested. Cashing in on the IDF brand has successfully led to Israeli security companies being some of the most successful in the world. The Palestine Laboratory is a signature Israeli selling point. Can you imagine that? The selling point of your weapons business is that you use them on men, women, and children who are all unarmed. Both the Israeli government and private companies promoted their products as effectively battle-tested on Palestinians. For example, Israeli technology was sold as the solution to unwanted populations at the US-Mexico border, where the Israeli company Elbit was a major player in repelling migrants. European governments also wanted to monitor refugees, so Israel Aerospace Industries, IAI, drones were employed for the task. And remember that Zionists don't care what you think. They don't care about either your morals or morals in general. And so there was a promotional video at the Paris Air Show in 2009 of Elbit Systems. You'll hear about Elbit over and over in this book. Israel's biggest defense company was advertising its equipment to an audience of global buyers. Elbit was showing a promotional video about killer drones, which have been used in Israel's wars against Gaza and over the West Bank. The footage had been filmed a few months before and showed the reconnaissance of Palestinians in the occupied territories. A target was assassinated. Months later, Feinstein investigated the drone strike. Andrew Feinstein is an expert on the global arms industry, particularly the illicit arms industry. Months later, Feinstein investigated the drone strike and discovered that the incident featured in the video had killed a number of innocent Palestinians, including children. This, of course, was not featured in the Paris Air Show. This was my introduction to the Israeli arms industry and the way it markets itself, he said. No other arms-producing country would dare show actual footage like that. He said it would be inconceivable that Lockheed Martin or BAE Systems, two other major defense contractors with tentacles in global wars, would show to buyers actual footage of bombing innocent civilians in Yemen or a drone strike anywhere in the Middle East. Israel is so far beyond the pale in the way that it operates and the way that it has oriented its economy. Then there is its general lawlessness and defiance of international law. They just don't give a damn. What's potentially even more grotesque or as grotesque as showing a video in which you're murdering civilians as part of a promotional sales package is sexualizing your weapon sales. If the fear of terrorism does not sell Israeli militarism, then sexual allure will. The Alpha Gun Girls were founded in 2018 by former IDF veteran Oren Julie, a group of scantily dressed women caressing Israeli military hardware and wearing camouflage. They mirrored a similar gun culture in the US, but with a strongly Zionist agenda. At the 2019 Defense, Homeland Security, and Cyber Exhibition in Tel Aviv, the AGA fondled rifles, posed for photos with the adoring crowd and passed out brochures with their Instagram handles listing bust measurements, shoe and clothing size, and numbers of followers. A long line of people waited to get autographs. The women are regularly seen posing in deserts, their clothes covered in fake blood. I don't know that I can add any commentary to that would be useful. Remember that we said that Israel doesn't care. Here are some quotes which underline that fact. This during this time, this would have been between 1975 and 1990 in reference to the Lebanese Civil War. War crimes during this time were par for the course. Sorry, not the Lebanese Civil War, the invasion of Lebanon by Israel, the 1982 invasion. War crimes during this time were par for the course. The former IDF Chief of Staff, Mordecai Gur, stated proudly in a 1978 media interview that targeting civilians was acceptable. The interviewer asked Gur if the IDF bombed people without distinction. He responded, after the massacre at Avanim, which was a bombing of an Israeli bus in 1970 near the Lebanese border that killed 12 civilians, including 9 children, I had 4 villages in South Lebanon bombed without authorization. The interviewer asked, without making distinctions between civilians and non-civilians? What distinction? Gur asked. Remember, in the Israeli mind, there is no distinction between civilians and non-civilians. A 1982 anecdote of the Israeli forces. Again, this would be in Lebanon. 2 targets in particular seemed to interest Ariel Sharon's army. One was the PLO Research Center. There were no guns at the PLO Research Center, no ammunition, no fighters, but there was something more dangerous. Books about Palestine, old records and land deeds belonging to Palestinian families, photographs about Arab life in Palestine, historical archives about the Arab life in Palestine, and most important, maps of pre-1948 Palestine with every Arab village on it before the State of Israel came into being and erased many of them. The research center was like an ark containing the Palestinians' heritage, some of their credentials as a nation. In a certain sense, this is what Sharon most wanted to take home from Beirut. You could read it in the graffiti the Israeli boys left behind on the research center walls. Palestinians? What's that? And Palestinians, F you. And something else that I'm not going to repeat. The PLO later forced Israel to return the entire archive as part of a November 1983 prisoner exchange. A rare moment of Israeli political honesty came in October 2021 when far-right Israeli parliamentarian Bezalel Smotrich, leader of the religious Zionist party and ally of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, I think he's to the right of Netanyahu, said in the Knesset to the Arab members, "You're only here by mistake because Ben-Gurion didn't finish the job, didn't throw you out in 48. It was an acknowledgement that ethnic cleansing took place in 1948, albeit delivered by one of the most racist and homophobic Israeli politicians." Israel was so confident in its actions, without fear of the International Criminal Court or any domestic sanction, that Brigadier General Zvika Fogel gave an interview on Israeli radio in April 2018. Fogel was a former chief of staff at Israel's Southern Command, which included Gaza. After Israeli snipers caused the death and injury of thousands of Palestinians, including children, radio host Ron Nasiel questioned Fogel and asked if the IDF should rethink its use of snipers. And if you remember this, there was the Great March of Return in which Palestinians non-violently walked towards the border fence, and Israel used snipers to kill children. Fogel said the use of snipers was appropriate. If this child or anyone else gets close to the fence in order to hide an explosive device, or check if there are any dead zones there, or to cut the fence so someone could infiltrate the territory of the State of Israel to kill us, then his punishment is death? Naziel asked. His punishment is death, the general argued. As far as I'm concerned, then yes. If you can only shoot him to stop him in the leg or arm, great. But if it's more than that, then yes, you want to check with me whose blood is thicker, ours or theirs. The Great March of Return was both a lab and showroom. The most sophisticated new weapons used against the Palestinian protesters was the Sea of Tears, a drone that dropped tear gas canisters on a desired area. Despite Israeli claims of accuracy, a tent full of Palestinian women and children had tear gas dropped onto them, as did groups of reporters. And as we've been watching the situation develop from October 2023 to now, I think even the author here has missed the point where he says, despite Israeli claims of accuracy, a tent full of Palestinian women and children had tear gas dropped onto them, as did groups of reporters. He's thinking this is a mistake. He's thinking that the IDF did not mean to do this. But I would argue it was meant by the IDF to do this, so it was accurate. So it's despite Israeli claims of accuracy, Israel claims to be accurate, and that is why, I would rewrite the sentence, Israel claims that their weapons are accurate, and that is why they hit a tent full of Palestinian women and children, and they hit a tent of reporters. Those are the people that they need to hit. They don't want reporters reporting on things, and women and children are military targets. They're not civilians. Remember, what's the context of what we've been reading here? There's no distinction. They're the same. Our blood is thicker than theirs, etc. Just be careful of giving Israel credit for something or taking away credit out of context. Israel's weapons are accurate, and when they kill civilians, they mean to do so. They never accidentally kill civilians. They intentionally kill civilians. That's all that they do. Israel doesn't make mistakes when it comes to killing. In the 2018 book, Rise and Kill First, The Secret History of Israel's Targeted Assassinations, Israeli reporter Ronen Bergman interviews Amir, a Unit 8200 veteran who had refused to carry out a blatantly illegal order in 2003 after a horrible Palestinian suicide bombing in Tel Aviv that had killed 23 people. I think Unit 8200 is the Israeli equivalent of the NSA. Amir successfully stopped the bombing of a Palestinian office building in Gaza with no connection to terrorism. One colleague did not understand his hesitation. "Why does it seem manifestly illegal to you?" the man asked. "They're all Arabs. They're all terrorists." I mean, I'm reading that and I know I'm laughing. It's not a laughing matter, but when you read something like that, you can't help but laugh because it's ridiculous. Bergman is matter-of-fact about the real role of Unit 8200. Unofficially, they were deciding whom Israel killed. So, one of the assertions the book makes is that Israel has never refused a weapons sale. So sometimes there's even laws in the United States about who you can sell weapons to, and don't get me started about America and its weapons productions. I'm not trying to defend America's weapon sales, but what I'm saying is there are certain laws in place in America that you can't sell weapons to these people because blank, blank, blank. I'm not saying it's right or it's wrong. Apparently, there's no such law in Israel. Apparently, Israel has never had met a weapons sale it didn't like, and this is an assertion that Loewenstein makes, and if the IDF has evidence that they've ever refused a weapons sale, I'd love to hear it. Israel's posture around the Rwandan genocide in 1994 was even worse. The government dispatched a medical aid team to assist survivors in Rwanda, led by the Minister of Environmental Protection, Yossi Sarid. But that mission was all for show, because the government had shipped weapons to the brutal Hutu regime, which had killed around 800,000 Tutsis in 100 days. Such shipments included Uzi submachine guns and hand grenades, both before and during the genocide. When Sarid was questioned about Israel supporting the Hutu-led massacres, he replied, "We have no control over where our weapons go." Inability to self-critique, inability to admit that they're wrong. Israel's relationship with Iran under the Shah was an early example of siding with an unpleasant regime. Newly declassified documents from Israel's state archives paint a picture of Israel's desperation to maintain relations with a Muslim nation that never officially recognized the Jewish state. Israel's founding leader, David Ben-Gurion, visited Tehran in 1961 and explained why the friendship between Israel and Iran could never become public. "Allow me to keep it a secret between us," he said. "Our relations are like a true love between two people without their getting married. It's preferable that way." No worrying about Shia world domination when there's weapon sales to be made, right? I wouldn't be. Would you be that surprised if Israel was secretly selling weapons to the Iranians now? Meanwhile, privatization of the occupation is gathering speed. AnyVision is an Israeli startup that secretly monitors Palestinians across the West Bank with a range of cameras, the locations of which are not acknowledged by the company or Israel. Artificial intelligence thus merges with biometrics and facial recognition at dozens of Israeli checkpoints throughout the West Bank. AnyVision claims that its technology does not discriminate on the basis of race or gender, and that it creates only ethical products. When asked by NBC News in 2019 about its work in the West Bank, CEO Elon Etstein initially threatened to sue them, denied there was even an occupation, and accused the NBC reporter of being paid by Palestinian activists. He later apologized for the outburst. Remember that any time that you're questioned, you're not supposed to engage in a calm and rational manner and discuss the facts. What you're supposed to do is yell at people and accuse them of anti-Semitism. That shows, of course, how right you are. So we're not just talking about nation-state actors. You have to realize that Israel is also training police forces, in particular U.S. police forces. There is a program called Deadly Exchange, which is run by the ADL here in the United States. One of the individuals behind the Deadly Exchange program, Ephraim Efrati, a former IDF soldier who became a harsh critic of the occupation, told me that his research into the issue revealed a telling example of how the Israeli occupation is a powerful inspiration for those who want to hear and apply it back home. I heard many U.S. police were cynical about Israeli training, he said. Rather than practical advice, they saw it as a way to get promotion and learn more aggressive states of mind. So, I mean, what is Israel going to teach you? Like, this is how you beat up civilians. Here's how you shoot a woman in the leg. Here's how you kill a child. I don't really understand what Israel has to teach other police forces other than how to become murderous and aggressive. But it's because they've got such a great brand name. They are, quote unquote, fighting terrorism. Germany has taken its love affair with Israel to dangerous, even absurd heights. The Deutsche Welle media organization updated its code of conduct in 2022 and insisted that all employees, when speaking on behalf of the organization, or even in a personal capacity, must support the right of Israel to exist or face punishment, likely dismissal. After the Israeli military shot dead Palestinian journalist Shireen Abu Akleh in the West Bank city of Jenin in May 2022, German police banned a peaceful public vigil in Berlin because of what German authorities called an immediate risk of violence and anti-Semitic messaging. When protesters ignored this request and took to the streets to both commemorate Abu Akleh and Nakba Day, police arrested 170 people for expressing solidarity with Palestine. It's dangerous to have a nonviolent vigil in memory of someone who was murdered by the IDF. What about in Kashmir? You have to realize that the ethno-state that Modi envisions for India, in which you have particular race, religion of people in the ascendancy, is modeled after what the Israelis have been doing. The growing affection between Israel and India was not just ideological, a mutual embrace of ethno-nationalism. The exchange of defense equipment helped enforce it. India does not need Israel to teach it how to oppress the Kashmiris, but the Jewish state has given the world's biggest democracy the tools and legitimacy to pursue it with extreme prejudice. And it is not just in Kashmir where India is pursuing Israeli-style policies. In 2022, authorities in the state of Uttar Pradesh demolished the homes of Muslims who were accused of ties to religious protests that turned violent. Does that sound familiar? The sight of bulldozers destroying homes was eerily reminiscent of Israeli actions against Palestinian structures in East Jerusalem and the West Bank. Like Israel, India claimed that the homes had been built illegally. Where else has Israeli technology been going? How about Mexico? The scandals kept on coming in Mexico, where for years NSO had its most profitable work. NSO is an Israeli technology company. Drug cartels colluded with corrupt Mexican officials to gain access to Pegasus. Pegasus is a phone hacking software, also built in Israel, and use it to eradicate mutual enemies. Criminal networks bribed corrupt officials to target individuals they want removed or monitored. Cyber surveillance is a completely unregulated industry, and despite NSO's assurances that There is no indication that Pegasus is monitored for breaches once installed. Since the 2010s, Mexico's voting pattern at the United Nations has shifted to a less critical stance toward Israeli policies. What a surprise. Unknown numbers of journalists critical of state corruption had their phones hacked by NSO spyware and ended up dead. They included freelance reporter Cecilio Pineda Birto in 2017. Just hours after hosting a Facebook Live video in which he accused local politicians and state police of working with a renegade thug, he was shot dead in the town of Ciudad Altamirano in southern Mexico. A few weeks before his killing, his mobile phone number had been selected as a possible target of Pegasus surveillance by the Mexican state. One of the interesting quotes that Netanyahu and other Zionists like to bring up is the idea of Israel being a light to the nations. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said in 2010, referencing the phrase from verses in the book of Isaiah, that Israel is a proud people with a magnificent country and one which always aspires to serve as a light unto the nations. And I suppose my question is, in what exactly has Israel been a light to the nations? It has been a merchant of death and destruction from its very beginning. The beginning of Israel is founded on the genocide and dispossession of the Palestinians. How could Israel ever be a light to the nations in its current form? If it were able to ever give up its Zionist hatred, it could possibly be a light to the nations. But in its current state, this is impossible. And just the level of delusion that they would say, yes, yeah, Israel's a light to the nations. Don't you know that? Another way of the Zionists, another phrase that Zionists use to think about themselves is the idea of what's good for the Jews. What's good for the Jews is a common refrain among the Israeli and Jewish diaspora, and it is used to justify all manner of nefarious collusion with awful regimes. Chaim Herzog, Israel's president between 1983 and 1993, was not embarrassed by this ideology. As he put it, we must be guided in our foreign policy relationships by the one criterion that has guided governments of Israel ever since the establishment of the state. Is it good for the Jews? As Noam Chomsky commented in his 1983 book, The Fateful Triangle, The United States, Israel, and Palestinians, to solely focus on supposed Jewish interests was an argument that rests on consequences for the Jews, not for the conquered population, whose rights and wishes are null, not an untypical stance among liberal Zionists or among Western intellectuals. The problem is, there are segments of the Israeli population that question this narrative. So if you had 100% of the population who buys into this, that would be one thing. But there has been a growing minority of Israelis who don't accept these assertions. A survey in 2021 conducted by Jewish Electoral Institute, a group led by leading Jewish Democrats, found that 34% of Jews agreed that Israel's treatment of Palestinians is similar to racism in the United States. 25% agreed that Israel is an apartheid state, and 22% agreed that Israel is committing genocide against the Palestinians. So if we aggregate those percentages, we're talking 1 in 5. That's not nobody. And I wonder, I mean, that's a 2021 survey. I wonder what it would look like today after everything that's happened in the last 9 months. If you do manage to convince the population of the rightness of your cause, then you have a paradigm that other thuggish regimes want to follow. This attraction stems from the sense, real or perceived, that fighting terrorism through methods of homeland security that include suspending due process in many areas of the criminal justice system, including torture, the right to a speedy trial, the freedom from arbitrary police searches, and the prohibition against indefinite incarceration and incognito detentions, to mention a few methods, does not conflict with democratic values. Thus, the ultimate attractiveness towards the Israeli experience in fighting terrorism is to its ability to link a militaristic worldview with a neoliberal economic agenda and a democratic political regime. You can have an ethno-state that is disguised as a democracy. I mentioned earlier in a quote about the facial recognition technology, and it made me realize that when I was in the West Bank last year, I was probably subject to this facial recognition technology. I didn't see it, so there wasn't any way for me to know. It's probably well hidden, but it's there. Blue Wolf is a version of a software called Wolfpack, which contains the personal details of virtually every Palestinian in the West Bank, including educational status, photos, security level, and family history. Soldiers in the West Bank were instructed in 2022 to enter the details and photos of at least 50 Palestinians into the Blue Wolf system every shift, and were not allowed to end their shift until they did so. There was no security rationale for these actions. This is a similar setup to what China does against the Uyghurs in its Xinjiang province, using surveillance and technology to both track and intimidate the residents, though Beijing receives far more international condemnation than the Jewish state does. Well, because you can't call the Chinese anti-Semitic, which we know is the worst thing that you could ever call anybody. Killing or injuring Palestinians should be as easy as ordering pizza. That was the logic behind an Israeli military-designed app in 2020 that allowed a commander in the field to send details about a target on an electronic device to troops who would then quickly neutralize the Palestinian. The colonel working on the project, Oren Matzaliak, told the Israeli defense website that the strike would be like ordering a book on Amazon or a pizza in a pizzeria using your smartphone. The level of dehumanization necessary to refer to the killing of a human being, almost always an innocent civilian, to refer to that as easy as ordering a book on Amazon or a pizza in a pizzeria. Part of doing these reviews is I seem to always be surprised even as much as I learn. There's still a level of horror that I can still encounter. During Operation Pillar of Defense, the IDF encouraged supporters of Israel to both proudly share when terrorists were killed, while at the same time reminding a global audience that the Jewish state was a victim. It was a form of mass conscription to the cause through the weaponization of social media. And we've actually seen this a lot in this period from October 2023 to now, this pride. We've seen this with these unfortunate women who, quote unquote, shout their abortions, very tragic. We have Israeli soldiers who take video of them shooting children in the head and then posting it to social media, or sniffing the underwear of little children and then posting it to social media. This has been going back some time, so it didn't start in this current period. And here, there's evidence during Operation Pillar of Defense that the IDF actually pushed the social media campaign. Go ahead and do this. Let us know, celebrate when quote unquote terrorists have been killed. The Palestinian population under military rule is completely exposed to espionage and surveillance by Israeli intelligence. While there are severe limitations on the surveillance of Israeli citizens, the Palestinians are not afforded this protection. There is no distinction between Palestinians who are and are not involved in violence. Information that is collected and stored harms innocent people. It is used for political persecution and to create divisions within Palestinian society by recruiting collaborators and driving parts of Palestinian society against itself. So that, I think, was taken from an open letter to Benjamin Netanyahu in 2014, and it was signed by a number of IDF veterans, right? I want to say something like 40-something veterans. It was an open letter. 43, there it is. 43 reserve soldiers explained why they refused to serve in the occupied territories. And that quote that I'd read you was part of that letter. One of the signatories, Sergeant Nadav, told The Guardian that they had entered Unit 8200 with the mistaken belief that they were protecting the Israeli Jewish population from terrorism. But in reality, the intelligence gathering on Palestinians is not clean in that sense. When you rule a population, they don't have political rights, laws like we have. The nature of this regime of ruling over people, especially when you do it for many years, it forces you to take control, infiltrate every aspect of their life. Nadav continued, Any Palestinian may be targeted and may suffer from sanctions, such as the denial of permits, harassment, extortion, or even direct physical injury. Such instances might occur if the individual is of any interest to the system for any reason, be it indirect relations with hostile individuals, physical proximity to intelligence targets, or connections to topics that interest 8200 as a technological unit. Any information that might enable extortion of an individual is considered relevant information. Whether said individual is of a certain sexual orientation, cheating on his wife, or in need of treatment in Israel or the West Bank, he is a target for blackmail. An anonymous Unit 8200 veteran said in 2021 that what he used to do was far from the cutting-edge image cultivated by Israel. Instead, he lamented, it was about blackmailing gay Palestinians, threatening Palestinians with health issues, or cutting off essential medical care if they did not comply. The system of control is complete because any Palestinian trait, whether benign or private, is leveraged to extract a price from an occupied people. Every Palestinian is defined as a threat, and civil society actors are arguably seen by Israel as the most threatening because they could mobilize international support against the occupation. Another Unit 8200 whistleblower said that every phone conversation in the West Bank and Gaza could be listened to by Israeli surveillance. He told Middle East Eye in 2021 that nothing was off limits. Israeli soldiers invaded the public and private lives of Palestinians and laughed when they heard people talking about sex. It might be finding gays who can be pressured to report on their relatives, or finding some man who is cheating on his wife, he said. Finding someone who owes money to someone, let's say, means that he can be contacted and offered money to pay his debt in exchange for his collaboration. So we keep seeing this pattern over and over of Israel using every single method that they can imagine of occupation. So it's not just external violence, which we can see, it's this internal violence in people's private lives, that there's no safe space for Palestinians to just be themselves. Now, I'm not condoning this sort of behavior, whether it's cheating on your wife or other things like, sodomitic acts. What I'm saying is that people do have a right to their personal lives, and this sort of invasion it's almost, I would say, worse than visible physical violence, which people can see. At least someone can defend against that, or they know. But this secret, silent invasion that nobody knows about, it's almost, I have to imagine, it's almost more terrorizing. It's more difficult. So the last part of the book deals quite heavily with social media bias against Palestinians by big tech, companies like Facebook, Instagram, etc., WhatsApp, in which Israelis are given a pass on quote-unquote hate speech, but Palestinians are not. And there's a lot of quotes here on this. Within Israel, the power of the state to crack down on what it deemed inappropriate content only grew. Israel's cyber unit was given the green light by the Supreme Court in 2021 to operate in the dark, liaise secretly with social media companies, and remove posts without any consultation with the users. It is a closed-loop system in which Palestinians are left guessing as to the reasons why their words disappear. The Washington Post headlined a story with remarkable honesty in May 2021. Facebook's AI treats Palestinian activists like it treats American black activists. It blocks them. It dismissed claims by Facebook and Twitter that it was the fault of artificial intelligence that Palestinian stories were disappearing online. Gillian C. York, Director for International Freedom of Expression at the Electronic Frontier Foundation, explained, ultimately, what we're seeing here is existing offline repression and inequality being replicated online, and Palestinians are left out of the policy conversation. This was confirmed in late 2021 when leaked documents from inside Facebook proved that senior executives didn't want to curtail extreme speech posted against minority groups in fear of offending, quote, conservative partners. So it's okay that you can use extreme speech against minority groups, but those minority groups are not allowed to use quote unquote extreme speech back. And I think what's been interesting since October 2023 is we've seen social media used by the Palestinians in a way that hasn't been filtered. Most of us have been able to get a lot of what's coming out of there, and the world has had a chance to see what it hasn't had before. So I think, I don't want to say this is outdated, but even in 2021, 2022, we saw this repression, and I'm certain there's still repression going on in social media. But what's remarkable is so much has come through, and so many people have learned so much because of social media. So I suppose you can shadow ban for only so long before the dam breaks, and I think the dam has recently broken at least a little bit. Incitement is so broadly defined by Israel that in many cases, simply expressing support for Palestinian human rights, sharing a video online, or being opposed to Zionist colonization is deemed inappropriate. Social media posts are increasingly the sole reason a Palestinian will be detained for days, weeks, or months by the Israeli military. Palestinian activist Dareen Tatur suffered years of house arrest and months in prison in 2018 for writing a poem that contained the words, "Resist my people, resist them." Israel accused her of inciting terrorism. After Amnesty International released a report in 2022 that accused Israel of practicing apartheid, users in some countries found that if they searched on Google for the report, the top entry was an Israeli advertisement accusing the NGO of anti-Semitism. Oh. Palestinian citizen Sami Janazre lives near Hebron and was arrested in 2015 for undisclosed reasons. He was not told why and was placed in administrative detention, a limbo state behind bars with no trial or charge. After going on a 71-day hunger strike, Israeli officials told him that he would be standing trial for social media incitement and was shown screenshots of his Facebook posts. Every Palestinian whom the Shin Bet security service finds has shared a picture of a shaheed, a martyr, or a prisoner, or has written a Facebook post about himself as a Palestinian. They could say this is incitement, he told Haaretz. How Israel has such influence over Silicon Valley is both obvious and ominous for the future of marginalized groups, because it is not just the Jewish state that has discovered the Achilles heel of big tech. India, under Prime Minister Narendra Modi, demanded that Facebook remove posts critical of his government's handling of the COVID pandemic in 2020, and the company mostly complied. Indian government officials had wanted around 100 posts on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to be removed because they did not like anything critical of the Modi government online. Some Facebook employees were outraged, worried that the corporation had buckled to a powerful populist government. One Facebook employee wrote internally that the company was acting out of fear because it was scared it might be banned from the country. Yeah, I think that's probably it. Another internal document obtained by The Intercept in 2021 revealed the rules regarding how to moderate the word Zionist. There was very little room to allow criticism of Zionism because it was deemed hate speech. A document used by the huge number of low-paid content moderators expected them to determine whether Zionist was being used as a proxy for Jew, including on posts about Israeli settlements. It gave one example that demanded removal: delete, parent content, Israeli settlers refused to leave houses built on Palestinian territory. Comment, F Zionists. While the word Zionist can be used in an anti-Semitic smear, it removes the ability of Palestinians to condemn the daily violence and oppression by Zionist actors. Many Palestinians and Arabs use the word Zionist when referencing colonization of Palestinian lands and not to demonize Jews. And I would say, if Zionist is a negative connotation for Jews, you have to ask yourself, why is that? Why is it considered negative? Too often, Facebook appears to be freelancing when it comes to silencing Palestinian voices, though it's impossible to know if Israel has pressured them. When Palestinian political activist Khalida Jarrar was unjustly imprisoned in 2021, Israel refused her request to attend her daughter Suha's funeral. A friend of Jarrar, Omal Nazal, had posted a letter on Facebook from her. Suha came into the world while her father was in jail, and she is leaving the world while her mother is in jail, Jarrar had written. 5 hours later, Facebook informed Nizal that her account would be blocked for 2 months because the post goes against our standards on dangerous individuals and organizations, so only you can see it. And what was on this secret list of dangerous individuals and organizations, which has remained secret for years? The Intercept obtained the list and associated rules and published them in 2021. They were, the outlet wrote, a clear embodiment of American anxieties, political concerns, and foreign policy values since 9/11, experts said, even though the policy is meant to protect all Facebook users and applies to those who reside outside of the United States, i.e., would be the vast majority of Facebook users live outside the United States. While the censoring is happening for the Palestinians, guess who's not getting censored? The double standards were obvious. In May 2021, according to the Arab Center for Social Media Advancement, 183,000 out of 1,090,000 Hebrew public conversations on social media were filled with incitement against Arabs and racism by Israeli Jews, so roughly 1 in every 5. And yet the content was not removed. Some of the offending tweets included, "A good Arab is a dead Arab," and "Scum, just wipe them off the face of the earth and never leave a trace. Slaughter all Gazans and all the Arabs everywhere." Another one read, "All the Arabs in the world and the Arabs who are reading this message, may all your family members have cancer." Sounds like the most moral army in the world to me. Sounds like a wonderful people that is giving a light to the nations. I'd like to learn more about Judaism and how to convert. In May 2021, the Facebook-owned WhatsApp messaging service was used by Israeli mobs to target Arabs and their businesses. One message read in Hebrew, "Shalom to all of Israel's Jewish citizens. I am honored to invite you to take part in a massive attack on Arabs that will take place today at 6 o'clock in the Bat Yam Boardwalk. Please arrive with the appropriate gear, brass knuckles, swords, knives, sticks, pistols, and vehicles with bull bars." The WhatsApp group was called Attacks on Arabs. I mean, this is real. This is for real. This WhatsApp message had real-life impact because on May the 12th, an Israeli mob destroyed an Arab-owned ice cream shop in the city of Bat Yam, just south of Tel Aviv. Various weapons were used, including the ones mentioned in the WhatsApp message that was circulated before the attack. Israeli activists who saw the messages had warned the Israeli police, but they were slow to respond. What a surprise. In her comprehensive 2020 report on YouTube for the Palestinian think tank Al-Shabaka, Nizal uncovered a long list of nonviolent videos uploaded by Palestinians that were deleted because they were allegedly violent. Videos of Israeli soldiers violently assaulting Palestinians were deemed inappropriate and removed. But Nizal notes that countless videos of the Israeli army proudly celebrating its violence are left untouched. Israeli pro-gun activists have no problems on YouTube, nor do huge numbers of IDF videos showing the destruction of Gaza. There's a lot more in this book, particularly about how the Israeli weapons and surveillance are used for against migrants, refugees, by other political parties, by the EU. Didn't have time to get into that, and in part because it really isn't focused on what I want to stay focused on, which is the Palestinians. While it is important to understand that the technology of the occupation is being spread around the world, I wanted to highlight that by using this book because it shows that we're all being affected by the occupation in some way. I didn't want to stray too far from highlighting Palestinian issues. So I would say about half the book is exclusively focused on the Palestinians and what's happening to them with this technology. And the other half of the book is how other people are being affected by this technology. So I spent most of my review talking about that. So if you like what you heard, you can support the channel by hitting like, subscribe, share this with people who are interested, open-minded. This is a bit, as I say, a bit more of a technical book, but it's not very long, and it's something that you could get through potentially in an afternoon or two. If you'd like to support the channel more, you can join my Patreon or my YouTube members group. You'll get early releases of videos like this one, and you'll have an opportunity to talk to me about my process of selecting books and what ends up making the cut and what doesn't make the cut when I do these videos. You can also look at my Amazon wish list, which is linked below, which will offer a number of books that I'm interested in, which I might review in 2025. You can push it to the top of the queue by by buying it for me and sending it my way. And a reminder that all of the donations that we get, including if you decide to send a super thanks for this video, a portion of that is going to go to the Palestine Children's Relief Fund in 2024. They're an organization that helps Palestinian children who could not otherwise get medical care get that medical care. And they're an organization that deserves to be known better. And you can click the link in the description to go and donate to them directly. Or as they say, you can donate to them indirectly by supporting this channel. As always, enjoy your reading.